Right
Hi.
there it is. I can hear you. Let me turn it up a little bit. Hey, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Nice to see you again, Reggie.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course, of course. So, season 2 is done. Um,
Right.
and I feel like it had such a huge reaction on social media, even more so than season 2. How was it like to see that reaction, especially when because of the strike, it really couldn't be spearheaded by the cast?
Um, it's been phenomenal. I mean, some of the people out there, they're calling themselves swagger ballers. The fan base, they are just out there, like really supporting and working for the show, like as if they were on payroll. And so it's been really inspiring, and it's been a lot of fun engaging with them.
Yes. How has that compared to like earlier in your career? Obviously, social media didn't exist. As a
Right.
creator, how does it feel to have that feedback? Is that something you consider, or is it something you try to kind of keep separate?
I mean, feedback from, like if you do a screening or, I started in theater, right? So, you have that live audience and the feedback is immediate. But just even in a film screening or screening of something you're doing on TV to have an audience there is great feedback because you just get to interact in person. But normally, for the bulk of what we do, it's on, TV, and you kind of like before social media, you get a few phone calls, but those are only people you knew.
Mhm.
So the fact that like we're hearing from people in London, in South Africa, across the country, it's really, really amazing. Um, and I got to say, we appreciate all of our fans and all the people that support us, but the Black women, they're going in hard. Like they are like championing this on a level that I could have never expected. And we're all just so grateful and appreciative.
Well, I think a part of the reason why is how Black women are written in the show. Um, they're very much strong, but they're also complex, and how they're also treated in the show isn't often how you see Black women being treated on television. Was that something that you had always kept in mind, or is kind of just something that you also practice in your everyday life?
It just feels pretty organic. It does. I mean, we really care about how we treat each other as a community. Women are a huge part of our community. But it's not lost on me of how a lot of Black women have been treated in this society. It's not, I mean, Malcolm had marked that in the 60s, that one of the most vilified people in the country are Black women. Like, he had concern for that. So, it's always just been a fabric of um, the way I move through the world, but also just even an extension of the writer's room. Um, I mean, I love that people have noticed certain things, like in season one, 105, Jace and Crystal are walking down the street, and then Jace turns and like walks on the outside of the street. And I really love like this. There are certain things that you don't necessarily know, or you don't even know if it will land with anyone. It just feels organic and authentic to the character. But the way people are picking it up, the way women are like, "Oh, I got that. Thank you." It's been really, really gratifying.
Yeah, even Musa says something about like, oh, like once you have the love of a Black woman, like he has that, I believe, in like the later part of the season. And it just definitely, as a Black woman, very much resonated to me. And even you're obviously talking about this more with your wife a little later online, but the Black love that's on the show, which I don't feel like is often seen, as things have like progressed with diversity. I feel like often when there is a Black character or a Black main character, their counterpart is usually a white person, or that's kind of the love story and that's how that's being represented. But that's definitely not how it's being represented in the show. And it's definitely something I appreciate, but it's also frustrating but beautiful that that's still like a very foreign concept to see on television.
Well, first of all, that line of dialogue you're referencing, yeah, it's from 206. Ike actually says in the locker room, if you see a black woman, I mean, if you really see her, you'll have a friend. She'll have your back for life. And then Naeem says, he co-signs, sort of says that that's taken from his player's handbook. you know,
Oh yes, that Musa
that's
often
that's,
references.
that's right, right. Not player, but player. You know,
Yes.
and so that's fun. But it's also been my experience. Um, just some of my um, just so many women have gotten me to where I'm at right now. And so, it's just authentic. Um, and yeah, there's a strong love story in Swagger, which really is Ike and Jace.
Hmm.
There's a lot of love stories in this narrative, but the one that's really been percolating a lot in season two is Jace and Crystal, and it's just garnered so many questions and attention, and so that's why we're gonna even get online tonight to talk about it.
What made you decide to not have them? Like, I was very surprised that like the last time they had text each other in the beginning of the season was like right after he moved, and that they hadn't really talked in a year. Because at the end of season one, like they're just together, and I guess obviously it's unrealistic to go like, oh, these 15-year-olds, they're just together forever and nothing bad's going to
Right.
happen. But it was a bit surprising that they had let all that time pass. Why did you approach it in that way?
Well, first of all, between season one and season two, there's a big gap between getting back into production. Yeah, and as I said earlier, in this sort of 2 year time span, these kids decided to keep growing, you know? So they just got so much older. And once I made the decision to go from ninth grade, like when we start season two, there's a small point of time where it's junior year, but then we quickly get into senior year. So essentially, we're going from ninth grade to senior year. And I didn't want it to be something toxic between them, but just people grow and they find themselves. And sometimes people go away and they come back. That's really how I saw it. And so, she was having other experiences, he was having other experiences. But even though if you're having these other experiences and you still have strong feelings for somebody, like if they start dating somebody else, you're gonna feel a certain way. So I think that the characters felt a certain way about seeing and knowing they were dating other people, and then that's sort of okay. I didn't talk to you the last week, and then it piles up to another week, and then another week, and so it was really more in that direction emotionally. But I'd also say, like, the minute something good happens to Crystal, like when she got recruited to college, the first person she thought to hit up was Jace. But because the weirdness happened between them, she held back.
Mhm.
When Jace was really in a dilemma, like really needed to talk to somebody he could trust and figure out if he was going to go see, his father and how he was going to deal with that. The person he's going to call is Crystal. So while they were not together emotionally, their connection was still strong, and it was just a matter of time before they'd be pulled back together.
Speaking of Jace's father, another thing that surprised me, but I guess in a good way, because it's good to be surprised on TV shows, was that they were still semi talking because to me at the end of season one, like it was done. Why did you decide to still that they would still kind of semi have a relationship, but that Jace had a different point of view and expectations for the relationship?
You know, they after season one, that was it. That was a wrap. Like Chase was not in communication with his father. So therefore his father would reach out to Ike wanting to know how his son was, how his son is doing. And just because his son was about to be 18, quote unquote, you know, full grown man, that was the impetus and the urgency to have them come together and meet again. And that's why Jace had to make the big decision as a man as to whether or not he wanted a dialogue with his pops. So that's really what we were doing there.
Yes. How was it like to explore Jace as I guess a legal adult? Because I feel like him turning 18 changes how everyone looks at him. Like Jenna isn't as overbearing as she was in season one. I kind of trust Jace's decision making more. Jace, with the whole thing with the coach, he very much he's not going to apologize, which he definitely shouldn't have, and is willing to deal with the consequences that we also have a pregnancy scare. Like, what was it like to, for one season, you're kind of dealing with this young teen, and now you're dealing with an adult that has these adult like consequences, but at the same time, he's 18, which is still very young.
Right, still very young, navigating his way to manhood.
Mhm.
All of our characters, all of our young characters, are navigating their way to adulthood. So that was a big thrust of the season. That was the exciting part of having them be in senior year, that urgency to figure out their life and where they're going to go and all the things that could derail them. Um, I think the other thing that was fun in working on that season is, you know, our youngest son, Toussaint, was 18 and he was a high school senior. So it was really and figuring out where he was going to go play baseball and you know, he's a D1 athlete, and so it was like all of these sort of mirrors were happening. He didn't have a pregnancy scare, as far as I know, you know, but but just that urgency to figure out life was really fun to write it and to see our kid go through it.
Yes. Speaking of I feel like a very D1 thing, and I remember last time I talked to you, like I had to know the answer immediately, and it was the first thing I asked because I only had 5 minutes, was that the final episode felt so final because we kind of know the outcome for everyone. How did you decide how each player's outcome was going to be, well, in like their kind of immediate future? Because it's not like, oh, now everyone's going to the NBA or everyone's playing a D1 sport. Like they all kind of have a different path, and it isn't as like now we're all just basketball players. How did you guys kind of decide to go and decide how each player's outcome was going to be?
I mean, first off, I just wanted to play it realistically. Um, you know, on my son's basketball team, some kids went on to play D1. My kid went to the Clive Davis School of Music, you know, and focused on music. My son's baseball team, some of the players went on to D1, D3, some just went in a different interest. So, you know, clearly felt that Jace, Phil, Nick have like the biggest trajectory to go as far as possible. Feel like Drew could be in the mix, and he chose to be at a D1 school and walk on.
Mhm.
Um, Otherwise, he'd be at a D3 school, I'm sure, playing ball. You know, so just wanted to just really take a hard look at what I thought what the characters' lives would be, and what would feel realistic. But I would also say, you know, on one level, we could say it feels final. Um, my goal was at the end of season two, I wanted us to know that they're going to be all right.
Yes.
We don't know what's going to happen next. We know they're going to have more challenges, but in this chapter of their lives, they got to this place. they got each other here as a team, and now they're ready for the next chapter of life. And that's really the vibe I was going for.
Yes, I cried like a baby several times during the end of that episode, but also um episode 5 when they visit the detention center, and then they also see an old teammate whose life is not going in the same direction as there was. Why did you decide to kind of integrate that trajectory for one of their former players?
So I thought it would hit home harder. It's easy to sort of dismiss people as, hey, here are these incarcerated people or these nameless um, characters that we don't know. I mean, I worked very hard with Raquel Baker, who co-wrote May So Apply with me to make us feel for these incarcerated young men. But I thought it would resonate in a different way to see, former teammate, and that's why we did it, and it just thought it would hit home.
Yes, it definitely did. As far as other teammates, I think it's interesting the kind of two main non-black players of the team, Drew and Nick. I feel like how they approach being an ally and also not being black is completely different. Like I feel like Drew is very much an ally. He was there with the whole Crystal coach situation, and Nick sometimes feels very separate from the team. Like in the first season, he didn't kneel. Um, at first, his mom wasn't encouraging him to kind of go along with the team and how they were feeling about the kind of the downfall and the consequences that were happening with the thought with the coach. How did you approach Drew and Nick and kind of them being outsiders and how they would integrate in this type of environment?
I mean, I think Drew's character is really interesting um, because uh, he reminded me of somebody in my personal life. One of our writers, Steve Diabaldo, he's a former D1 player, and he really relates to Drew in many ways. Drew mirrors so many of his experiences of being the only white player or one of the few white players on his basketball team. Somebody in KD's camp of growing up, KD's life, there was a player like that. So had like real life templates. Um, and so really what it is just looking to, I mean, Drew is somebody that learned a lot about life, not just about basketball, but about culture and looking at the world in a different way because of these experiences. And so, we wanted him to have that. Um, and Nick, I mean, Nick came into the team later. He was on a different team and he came in. So he didn't have any emotional alignment with everyone to have been involved in the attack in defending Crystal. So they've always sort of kept him on a need to know basis and didn't feel like he needed to know any of it. But on the other hand, they would say he's their brother. So there's always like that weird complication because there's something that happened that nobody wants to talk about. But, you know, I grew up in the Bronx, was actually where Jason Rivera, who plays Nick, is from as well. Um, and my experiences growing up, like Black, Puerto Rican, like we were all down with each other. There was no real division across race lines. Like we were all cool. And so that's just a place I operated from. Um, but the thing that's important is Black, white, even if we're all Black, even if we're, Puerto Rican, just different culture, like it's okay to have different points of view, particularly on the team. And the different points of view doesn't mean that you're bad or good. It just means that you're looking at it differently. And it's really a part of their maturity that they could have different points of view and still come together, as a team and as a family.
Yes. We were talking earlier about that. A lot of people, obviously, because they have such amazing chemistry on and off screen, Jace and Crystal, but also kind of the love story of Ike and Jace. And O'Shea wasn't even the original Ike, I remember reading. How did you feel, or how was it like? Because obviously Isaiah and O'Shea have like this huge chemistry that makes this relationship be believable. How was it like as a director or creator or writer to be able to get that, and like how did their even personal relationship kind of shape the relationship and dynamic between Ike and Jace?
It was effortless. I mean, sometimes you just get blessed in that way. O'Shea just has such a generous spirit. He's funny and one of those sort of people that can be joking up to the moment you call action. They can turn the switch, become serious. But the rapport with O'Shea Jackson Jr. and Isaiah Hill was just pure and organic and magic, and that's why you feel it on screen. It's not me trying to manufacture something that's not there. Like they are really down with each other. O'Shea's down with all of us, and so to tell you like that, like that's what you want. You want to work with, you want to work with talented people. You also want to work with good people. And what we do is so hard that if people aren't clicking, if they're not being good to each other, if you're not having fun, it just makes it that much harder. And I'm going to tell you something. There's one thing that's going to happen with O'Shea Jackson Jr. on set. You're going to have fun.
That's amazing. One more thing I wanted to ask about. I feel like there's the idea of the 24-hour person, the idea of NBA never being afraid, the idea that he had that wasn't successful at, for not saying can't, for a year. How do you kind of have these ideas? Is this kind of how you personally approach life? Or was that just something that you're trying to manifest for people who are watching, and even for yourself, of just not being afraid and being a person who is there for people and can be able to count on?
Well, the idea of 24-hour person is something I had an elder told me, I don't know, maybe a decade ago. And like, what a challenging concept. 24-hour person, someone you can count on 24 hours a day, someone consistent. It's such a hard concept to execute. But so, so it's something I've aspired to do for about 10 years now. And was really excited to give that to Ike and let that be, one of his traits, one of his aspirations that he passes on to his players. And never be afraid is an interesting concept. I think what was more true is when in season 2, Jace and Ike are shooting around, and then they say, "Never be afraid to be afraid."
Mhm.
They're like, "Nah," just because the acronym doesn't work as well. But that is more true. I think it really is not just like never be afraid. It's really never be afraid to go for it. Never be afraid to fail. Um, Never be afraid to be afraid and do it anyway.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. This was incredible. I
Yeah,
really appreciate it. I can't wait to talk about future projects I heard about once you literally can do that. But yes,
right.
I will be in touch, and thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate it
Awesome.
too. All
Thank
right.
you.